Cargo haulers weren't supposed to explode. That was the general consensus among people who flew them anyway. Yet here was Rachel, proving once again that the universe had a sick sense of humor and absolutely no respect for consensus. Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. The navigation system had hiccuped, just a tiny little malfunction, barely worth mentioning. And suddenly, her ship was kissing the atmosphere of an uncharted moon at roughly the wrong angle, the wrong speed, and with entirely too much enthusiasm. The hull shrieked. Alarms screamed. Rachel did neither, because screaming used oxygen, and she needed all of hers for not dying. She almost managed it. The crash site looked like someone had thrown a metal whale at a jungle and watched it explode in slow motion. Debris scattered across a clearing that hadn't asked to be a clearing until about 30 seconds ago, when several tons of human engineering had redecorated it. Smoke rose in lazy spirals toward twin suns that hung in an amber sky, looking smug about the whole situation. Rachel dragged herself from the wreckage, which was generous. Mostly, the wreckage spat her out like a bad meal. Her ribs screamed. Her shoulder hung at an angle that shoulders really shouldn't hang at. Burns decorated her left arm in angry red patterns that would have been artistic if they weren't so agonizing. "Well," she muttered, spitting blood onto alien soil, "that could have gone better." She limped toward what used to be the emergency supplies locker, now a twisted metal sculpture that required kicking, swearing, and more kicking. The universe rewarded her persistence with a med kit that had somehow survived being thrown through a planetary atmosphere. Small miracles. She'd take them. The jungle around her pulsed with sound. Clicks, whistles, something that might have been breathing or might have been wind through vegetation that had no business being that shade of purple. The twin suns beat down with the kind of heat that made you question every life choice that led to this moment. Rachel pressed her back against a tree trunk that felt more like stone than wood and assessed the damage. The gash across her ribs was deep, ugly, and bleeding with the enthusiasm of a wound that knew it had an audience. Her shoulder needed popping back into place, which was going to hurt like... She slammed it against the tree. The sound that came out of her wasn't quite a scream, more like a scream's cousin who was trying to keep it together at a funeral. Her shoulder clunked back into its socket with a sensation that rewrote her definition of unpleasant. "Okay," she gasped, vision swimming. "Okay, that's the warm-up done." The medkit offered her a curved needle, thread, and antiseptic that might as well have been liquid fire. No anesthetic. Those had shattered in the crash, because of course they had. Rachel threaded the needle with shaking hands and stared at the wound. This was going to suck. She pressed the edges of torn flesh together and pushed the needle through. Her entire nervous system filed a formal complaint. She ignored it, pulled the thread tight, and went in for another stitch. Then another. Blood made everything slippery. Sweat made everything worse. The twin suns watched with what she swore was judgment. "You know what?" she said to nobody in particular, voice tight. "I've had better days, but I've had worse too. There was that station fire, and the time with the asteroid miners, and, oh hell, that hurts. The incident with the cargo container and the airlock malfunction." She was talking to keep herself conscious, and she knew it. The alternative was passing out half-sutured in an alien jungle, and that seemed like poor planning. Something moved in the trees. Rachel's hands froze, needle halfway through another stitch. Her eyes tracked left without moving her head. Survival Training 101. Don't make sudden movements when something's watching you, especially when that something was breathing loud enough to hear from 30 feet away. The vegetation rustled. Leaves that looked like purple leather shifted. And then, slowly, carefully, like it was making a decision, something emerged. It was roughly the size of a wolf, if wolves had 6 legs and looked like they'd been designed by someone who took apex predator as a personal challenge. Midnight fur caught the light and threw back bioluminescent patterns that flickered blue and green along its flanks. Its eyes were large, forward-facing, and entirely too intelligent. 6 limbs meant it could move in ways that would make a gymnast weep. A predator, obviously, definitely. The kind of creature that appeared in survival guides under "avoid at all costs." Rachel went back to stitching her wound. "Hey there," she said conversationally, pulling another stitch tight. "Come to watch the show?" "Fair warning. It's mostly just me bleeding and swearing. Not much entertainment value, unless you're into that sort of thing." The creature's head tilted. It took one step closer, then another. Not charging, not fleeing, watching. Those luminescent patterns pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat made visible. Rachel finished another stitch. "You're young," she observed, noting the creature's proportions, the way it moved with curiosity rather than confidence. "Got separated from your pack, maybe? That's rough. I got separated from my ship. Well, not separated so much as forcibly ejected via catastrophic malfunction, but same principle." The creature, the cub really, because that's what it was, crept closer still. Close enough now that Rachel could see the individual markings, the way its nostrils flared as it scented blood and human and antiseptic. "Easy," Rachel murmured, tying off another stitch. "Just a stupid human, doing stupid human things. Nothing to get excited about." Her hands were steady despite the pain, despite the blood loss, despite the 6-limbed predator currently close enough to pounce. She'd learned a long time ago that panic was expensive, and calm was cheap, even when calm was mostly an act performed for an audience of 1. 3 more stitches. Her vision blurred at the edges. The cub sat down, haunches settling onto the ground, and simply watched. Those eyes tracked every movement of the needle, every pull of the thread, every wince Rachel couldn't quite suppress. "There," Rachel finally said, tying off the last stitch with fingers that shook from effort rather than fear. "Probably. Not pretty, but it'll hold. That's the thing about surviving. Doesn't have to be elegant, just has to work." She slumped back against the tree, breathing hard, covered in blood and sweat and the general debris of having a very bad day. The emergency beacon in the wreckage was silent. Either it was dead, or it had transmitted before dying. Either way, she was stuck here for now. The cub still hadn't moved. It sat there in a patch of amber sunlight, watching her with an expression that might have been curiosity or hunger or something else entirely. Rachel met its gaze and saw something flicker in those alien eyes. Recognition, maybe. Of what? She couldn't say. "So," Rachel said, voice rough, "what now?" The cub's response was to stand, turn slightly, and move into a shaft of light that illuminated its left side. And then Rachel saw them. Scars, deep ones, running across the creature's shoulder and down its flank. Old wounds, badly healed, the kind that left marks and memories. One of its hind legs bore a distinctive limp, the result of an injury that had mended wrong. These weren't the clean scars of successful hunts. These were the messy scars of survival against bad odds. The cub stood there, deliberate, letting her see, showing her. Rachel's breath caught. This wasn't random. This was communication. Slowly, every movement telegraphed, careful not to startle. Rachel rolled up her sleeve. Her arm told its own story in scar tissue. A burn that wrapped around her forearm from a ship fire 6 months ago. A jagged line from a pirate's blade that had come too close. Claw marks from her first planetary expedition, when she'd learned the hard way that local wildlife didn't always appreciate visitors. She held her arm out, letting the twin suns illuminate every mark. "Yeah," she said softly. "I get it. Survival isn't clean, is it?" The cub's luminescent patterns pulsed brighter for just a moment. Then it moved, fluid, graceful despite the limp, and settled down onto the ground beside her. Not touching? Not yet. Just close. Sharing space. Sharing something that went deeper than species or language or the vast gulf between human and alien. Rachel looked at the creature beside her and made a decision that was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. "Flint," she said. "I'm calling you Flint. Something about those sparks in your fur and the sharpness in your eyes." Flint's ear twitched, close enough to acknowledgement for now. They sat there together as the twin suns tracked across the sky. A bleeding human and a scarred predator cub, two survivors in a jungle that wanted them both dead. Rachel's medkit lay open beside her. Her ship smoldered in the background. The emergency beacon stayed silent. And despite everything, the crash, the injuries, the hostile environment, the uncertain future, Rachel felt something she hadn't expected. Not quite hope, but not quite despair either. Something in between. Something that tasted like stubborn defiance and smelled like burned metal and alien flowers. Something that whispered, "You're not done yet." Neither of them were. Exhaustion hit Rachel like a freight train made of lead and bad decisions. One moment she was conscious, the next her body was staging a coup and demanding immediate unconsciousness. She tried to fight it. Staying awake in hostile territory was Survival 101, but her body had other ideas, and, frankly, her body was making some compelling arguments. Her head lolled against the tree trunk. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her was Flint, still sitting nearby, those bioluminescent patterns pulsing in a rhythm that almost seemed concerned. Then, nothing. Well, not nothing. Sleep. But the kind where part of your brain stays on guard duty, waiting for teeth or claws or whatever else the universe wanted to throw at you. Rachel's subconscious kept one ear open, monitoring for threats while the rest of her took an involuntary vacation. Hours passed. The twin suns tracked across the amber sky, painting the jungle in shifting shades of gold and shadow. The wreckage continued its slow process of cooling, metal ticking and groaning as it adjusted to local temperatures. And Flint stayed. Not sleeping, not really. The cub's head would lift periodically, ears swiveling to track sounds that Rachel's unconscious mind couldn't process. Those intelligent eyes scanned the tree line, watching for movement, for threats, for anything that might require action. When nothing appeared, Flint's head would lower again, settling onto crossed forepaws, but never fully relaxing. Guard duty, basically. Which was hilarious when you considered that this was an apex predator cub protecting a human who'd crashed into its territory like the universe's worst houseguest. Rachel woke to the sensation of something breathing near her face. Her eyes snapped open, hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there, and found herself staring directly into Flint's luminescent gaze from about 6 inches away. "Morning," she croaked. "Or afternoon. Or whatever time it is when you wake up feeling like you've been beaten with a pipe wrench." Flint's head tilted, those patterns flickering in what might have been amusement, or might have been hunger. Hard to tell with alien body language. Rachel's ribs throbbed. Her shoulder ached with the special intensity reserved for joints that had been forcibly relocated. The stitches pulled when she breathed, reminding her that field surgery was always temporary and frequently optimistic. But she was alive, which was better than the alternative. She looked at Flint, still sitting there like they'd made some kind of arrangement she didn't remember agreeing to. "You stayed," Rachel said, and it came out more surprised than she'd intended. Flint's ear twitched. The cub shifted position, settling onto its haunches with that peculiar grace that six-limbed creatures seem to have mastered. The limp was more obvious now. That rear leg definitely wasn't bearing weight correctly. Rachel's stomach chose that moment to remind her that she hadn't eaten since before the crash, which felt like a lifetime ago. She fumbled for her emergency rations, finding 2 protein bars that had somehow survived being thrown through an atmosphere and smashed into alien terrain. Galaxy-class manufacturing, those things. She tore one open, took a bite, and nearly gagged. The flavor profile could best be described as vaguely food-adjacent, with notes of cardboard and regret. But calories were calories, and her body needed fuel. Flint watched with intense interest, nostrils flaring. "Oh, you want some?" Rachel held out a piece of the protein bar. "Fair warning, these taste like someone compressed sadness into a rectangle, but they'll keep you alive, which is apparently the design philosophy." Flint leaned forward, sniffing the offering with obvious suspicion. The cub's nose wrinkled, an expression that transcended species and clearly communicated, "Are you seriously trying to feed me this?" Rachel laughed, which hurt her ribs but felt necessary. "Yeah, I know, but beggars and alien predator cubs can't be choosers." After a long moment of consideration that suggested Flint was weighing dignity against hunger, the cub took the offering, delicately, almost carefully, like Rachel might snatch it back. Then Flint retreated a few feet and consumed it with the sort of mechanical efficiency that suggested taste wasn't a factor, only nutrition. "See? Told you it was terrible." Rachel took another bite of her own bar. "Welcome to human space travel cuisine. We've been perfecting the art of making food that technically qualifies as edible for generations now." They sat there in companionable silence, human and alien, sharing a meal that neither of them particularly enjoyed. The twin suns had shifted position, throwing longer shadows across the clearing. The jungle hummed with life, things clicking, whistling, making sounds that Rachel's earth-born brain couldn't quite categorize. Rachel found herself studying Flint more closely, now that immediate survival wasn't consuming all her attention. The scars were more extensive than she'd first noticed. The shoulder wound looked old, maybe months healed. But there were others, smaller marks along the ribs, a notch missing from one ear, claw marks on the foreleg that matched the spacing of Flint's own claws. Pack fights, probably. Dominance disputes? The kind of violence that came from living in a social hierarchy where strength determined everything. "Those look like they hurt," Rachel said quietly, nodding toward the shoulder scar. "Bad fight?" Flint's patterns dimmed slightly, the equivalent of a grimace, maybe. The cub's gaze tracked to its own shoulder, then back to Rachel, and something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps. Recognition that pain was a universal language, regardless of how many legs you walked on. Rachel pushed up her other sleeve, revealing more history written in scar tissue. This one, she pointed to a burn on her upper arm, was from a coolant leak. Station fire. Got 30 people out before the hull breached. This one, she traced a long, thin line, was from my first ship. Cargo container broke loose during a hard burn. Caught me across the shoulder. Thought I was done for. She paused, looking at the collection of marks. This one, though. She touched a set of 4 parallel scars on her forearm. This one's my favorite. First planetary expedition. Didn't realize the local wildlife was territorial. I realized real fast when something that looked like a cross between a bear and a nightmare came at me. Fought it off with a cargo hook and sheer stubbornness. Flint moved closer, nose working, scenting the old wounds. Those intelligent eyes tracked from scar to scar, as if reading Rachel's history through the marks she'd accumulated. "Yeah," Rachel said softly. "That's the thing nobody tells you about surviving. It leaves evidence. Every time you should have died but didn't, your body keeps the receipt." She rolled her sleeve back down, suddenly aware that she was having a moment with an alien predator in a crashed ship's shadow. The absurdity hit her. Here she was, sharing trauma, bonding with a creature that could probably kill her without much effort. And somehow it felt more natural than half the conversations she'd had with other humans. "You got pushed out, didn't you?" Rachel asked, watching Flint's reaction. "Your pack. They saw the injury, the limp, and decided you were a liability. Survival of the fittest and all that." Flint's luminescent patterns flickered in a pattern that felt like confirmation. The cub's ears flattened briefly, then perked back up. Body language that didn't need translation. "Yeah, I've been there," Rachel said. "Different context, but same principle. Space hauler crews don't like weaknesses either. First time I got injured badly, my captain wanted to drop me at the next station. Said I was a risk. Said injured crew cost money and caused problems." She smiled without humor. "I convinced him otherwise, by which I mean I finished the job with a broken arm and proved I could still pull my weight. Humans are weird like that. We don't handle rejection well, so we just get stubborn instead." Flint settled down beside her again, closer this time. Close enough that Rachel could feel the warmth radiating from the cub's body, could hear the steady rhythm of breathing that sounded almost like a purr but lower, more resonant. "So here we are," Rachel said, leaning her head back against the tree. "Two rejects, sitting in a jungle, sharing terrible food and comparing scars. The universe has a weird sense of humor." The twin suns continued their slow arc across the sky. Rachel's emergency beacon remained silent. The jungle kept making its alien noises. And somehow, despite everything, the crash, the injuries, the uncertainty, Rachel felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope, exactly. Hope was too fragile, too optimistic for situations like this. But something adjacent to hope. Something that tasted like not giving up, and smelled like antiseptic and alien flowers, and the particular scent that Flint carried. Something musky and wild and alive. "We're going to be okay," Rachel told Flint, believing it for the first time since the crash. "I don't know how, and I don't know when, but we're going to survive this. You know why?" Flint's ear twitched, attention focused entirely on her. "Because survival is what we do. It's not pretty, it's not elegant, but it's what got us this far. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let a little thing like a ship crash and hostile alien terrain stop me now." Flint made a sound, low, rumbling, that same almost purr. The bioluminescent patterns pulsed in steady, slow waves. And if Rachel didn't know better, she'd say the cub was agreeing with her. They sat together as the day aged around them, sharing space and warmth and an understanding that went deeper than words. Two survivors, marked by their refusal to quit, finding something unexpected in each other's company. Companionship, maybe. Or alliance. or just the simple comfort of not being alone. Whatever it was, Rachel would take it. The jungle went silent, not the comfortable silence of rest, or the neutral silence of waiting. This was the aggressive, predatory silence that meant something big and dangerous had just entered the neighborhood, and everything with survival instincts was holding its breath. Rachel felt it in her bones before she heard anything. That primitive part of the human brain that remembered being prey, that had kept her ancestors alive on African savannas, started screaming warnings. Flint felt it too. The cub's entire body went rigid, luminescent patterns flaring bright, then dimming to almost nothing. Camouflage. Defense. The body language of something that knew it was in serious trouble. "What?" Rachel started, but Flint's low growl cut her off. Then the trees moved. Except they weren't trees. They were Najra, adult Najra, the kind that made Flint look like a house cat next to a tiger. 6 of them melted out of the vegetation with the fluid grace of creatures born to hunt, their bodies massive and scarred and absolutely terrifying. Rachel's hand instinctively reached for a weapon that still wasn't there. Fantastic. Perfect. Just what this day needed. The lead Najara was enormous, easily twice Flint's size, maybe 3 times. Scars covered its body in patterns that told stories of violence and victory. Its luminescent markings pulsed in deep crimson, nothing like Flint's blue-green glow. This was the Alpha, obviously, the pack leader. And based on the way it was looking at Flint, this wasn't a happy family reunion. "Oh," Rachel said quietly. "Oh, that's bad." The Alpha's gaze swept over Flint with something that looked disturbingly like contempt. Then those eyes, intelligent, calculating, utterly alien, locked onto Rachel, assessing, measuring, deciding whether she was threat, prey, or just an inconvenient obstacle. Flint positioned itself between Rachel and the pack, which was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, probably both. The cub's body language screamed defiance despite the trembling in its legs, despite the obvious size difference, despite every logical reason to run or submit. The Alpha made a sound, low, resonant, that reverberated through Rachel's chest like a second heartbeat. Communication, clearly. A language that Rachel's brain couldn't process, but her gut understood just fine. Move or die. Flint didn't move. "Okay," Rachel muttered, struggling to her feet despite her protesting ribs and shoulder. "Okay, we're doing this. Apparently, we're doing this." Standing put her at eye level with the Alpha's shoulder, which really drove home how outmatched they were. 6 adult predators, each one a perfectly evolved killing machine, versus 1 injured human and 1 damaged cub. The smart play was to step aside, let nature take its course, and hope the pack ignored her in favor of their actual target. Rachel had never been particularly smart. She stepped forward, putting herself next to Flint. The cub glanced at her with an expression that might have been surprise, or might have been, "What are you doing, you insane human?" "Hey there," Rachel said to the Alpha, proud that her voice only shook a little. "Nice afternoon for a walk, isn't it? Lovely weather, lovely jungle, lovely impending violence." The Alpha's head tilted. One ear swiveled forward, focusing on her. The other pack members shifted position, flanking, preparing for whatever came next. Rachel recognized pack tactics when she saw them. Wolves did it, lions did it. Apparently, 6-limbed alien predators did it too. Surround, isolate, eliminate. Universal strategies for universal problems. "Here's the thing," Rachel continued, because talking was better than screaming, and she'd already committed to the bit. "I get it. I do. Flint here isn't up to your standards. Got injured, got slow, became a liability. Survival of the fittest, red in tooth and claw, all that. But see, there's another way to look at it. She was making this up as she went, which seemed to be her life's primary skill. The alpha watched with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been impatience before the eating started. "Those scars?" Rachel gestured to Flint's shoulder, then to her own arms. "Those aren't weaknesses. Those are evidence. Proof that we survived things that should have killed us. That's not fragility. That's the opposite. That's strength." The alpha's patterns pulsed. A response, maybe. Or maybe just the predator equivalent of "cool story, now move." Rachel didn't move. "I'm not leaving," she said flatly. "And before you decide I'm just easy protein, you should know something about humans." She pulled her sleeve up higher, exposing the full gallery of scars. "We don't quit. We don't back down. And we absolutely, categorically refuse to abandon things we've decided to protect." One of the pack members, not the alpha, but clearly high-ranking, took a step forward. Testing. Probing for weakness. Rachel met its gaze and held it, which was either incredibly brave or incredibly suicidal. She was losing track of which was which. The alpha rumbled again, deeper this time. An order. The second-in-command's ears flattened in what might have been acknowledgement or disagreement, but it stopped advancing. For now. Then the alpha moved. Not attacking, not quite. More like demonstrating. It circled them slowly, deliberately, each step measured. Showing off its size, its scars, its absolute dominance. This was power on display, the kind that didn't need to be violent because the threat was implicit. Rachel's emergency flare was still clipped to her belt. She'd forgotten about it until just now, when her hand brushed against it while trying not to look like she was reaching for a weapon. It was designed for signaling rescue ships, but it would also create a hell of a light show and enough noise to wake the dead. Or startle a pack of predators. Terrible idea. Absolutely terrible. Definitely going to get her killed. Rachel grabbed the flare, yanked the ignition tab, and threw it directly at the alpha's feet. The jungle exploded into light and sound and chemical fury. The flare screamed like a dying star, spitting white-hot fire and smoke in all directions. The alpha leaped backward, patterns flashing in alarm. The pack scattered, momentarily blinded and confused by the sudden assault on their senses. "Yeah!" Rachel shouted over the roar. "That's right! Humans cheat! We use tools and tricks, and we absolutely do not fight fair!" Flint made a sound that might have been approval or might have been "you're completely insane," but stayed at her side regardless. The flare burned for 30 seconds that felt like 30 hours. When it finally sputtered out, leaving smoking residue and the smell of sulfur, the pack had regrouped. And they looked angry. Well, angrier. Their patterns pulsed in aggressive reds and oranges, body language screaming threat. The alpha's gaze locked onto Rachel with the kind of focus that usually preceded something dying. It took a step forward, then another. No more circling, no more posturing. This was the wind-up before the pitch. Rachel grabbed a piece of sharp hull plating from the wreckage nearby. It wasn't much, jagged metal, about the length of her forearm, but it was better than nothing, barely. "Come on, then," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Let's see what you've got." The alpha charged. Not a full assault, not yet. A test, a feint. Seeing how this strange two-legged creature would respond when faced with actual violence. Rachel sidestepped, barely, her ribs screaming protest, and slashed with the makeshift blade. She didn't connect, but that wasn't the point. The point was showing she'd fight back. The Alpha's second-in-command came from the flank, moving with that terrible six-limbed speed. Rachel saw it coming just in time to raise the hull plating, catching claws that sparked against metal. The impact jarred her shoulder, sending white-hot pain through recently relocated joints. But she didn't fall, didn't retreat, just stood there, bleeding and stubborn, and absolutely refusing to give ground. Flint lunged at the second-in-command, jaws snapping. The attack lacked the precision of a healthy predator, that bad leg throwing off the cub's balance, but the intent was clear. The second-in-command turned to deal with Flint, and Rachel took advantage of the opening. She drove the hull plating down, catching the second-in-command across the shoulder. Not deep. She didn't have the strength or angle for that, but enough to draw blood. Enough to make a point. The second-in-command backed off, reassessing. Rachel stood there, breathing hard, covered in sweat and blood. Some hers, some not. Her vision swam. Her legs shook. Every part of her body was filing formal complaints about this entire situation. But she stayed upright through sheer spite and stubbornness. "Is that it?" she called out, knowing she was probably pushing her luck but unable to stop herself. "That's your best? Because I've survived worse. I've survived ship fires and cargo bay explosions and pirates and vacuum exposure and every other horrible thing space could throw at me. You think you scare me?" She was absolutely terrified. But that was beside the point. The Alpha watched her with those intelligent eyes. Calculating something? Running numbers that Rachel couldn't guess at. The pack waited for orders, ready to finish this if commanded. Then, slowly, deliberately, the Alpha stepped back. Not in retreat, not in defeat, but in something else. Acknowledgement, maybe. Recognition. The kind of gesture that spoke to understanding rather than submission. The Alpha approached Flint, who stood frozen despite every instinct probably screaming to run. It leaned down, sniffed the cub thoroughly, then made a low sound, complex, layered, nothing like the earlier aggression. Then it looked at Rachel and did the same. Close enough that she could count its teeth, close enough to smell the predator musk and blood and alien wildness. Those eyes held hers for a long moment. Then the Alpha turned and walked back into the jungle. The pack followed, melting into vegetation like they'd never been there at all. Rachel stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. "Did we?" she started. Then her legs gave out. She sat down hard, pain flaring through her entire body. "Did we just survive that?" Flint settled beside her, patterns pulsing in relieved blues and greens. The cub made that almost purr sound, pressing close. They'd survived. Somehow. Against odds that should have been impossible. Because that's what survivors did. Rachel woke up to the sound of Flint making noises she'd never heard before. Not the almost purr. Not the warning growl. This was something else entirely. High-pitched, rhythmic, almost musical. The kind of sound that carried meaning beyond simple communication. The cub stood at the edge of the clearing, head tilted back, calling out to something Rachel couldn't see. "What are you doing?" Rachel tried to sit up and discovered that her body had other opinions about movement. Everything hurt. Her ribs felt like someone had used them for percussion practice. Her shoulder throbbed with a special intensity reserved for joints that had been abused and asked to perform miracles. The stitches in her side pulled with every breath. She'd survived the pack. Barely. And now her body was presenting the bill for that survival. Flint continued the call, patterns pulsing in time with the sound. Once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. The cub turned back to her, settling down close enough that Rachel could feel its warmth. Calling for backup? Rachel managed a weak smile. Smart. I could use some backup too, honestly. Preferably the kind that comes with medical supplies and maybe a ship that isn't scattered across half an acre. The twin suns were lower now, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold that would have been beautiful if Rachel wasn't busy cataloging her injuries. Blood loss, exhaustion, possible infection brewing in wounds that had been stitched with shaking hands in non-sterile conditions. She'd survived worse, but that didn't make this good. Her emergency beacon had transmitted before dying. She remembered that now, through the fog of pain and adrenaline crash, which meant rescue was possible. Eventually. Maybe. If she lasted that long. Hey, Flint, Rachel said quietly. If I pass out again and don't wake up, I just want you to know you're pretty cool for an alien predator cub. Top tier, really. Would recommend. Flint's ear twitched. Those intelligent eyes studied her with an expression that might have been concern, or might have been the alien equivalent of, "Don't you dare die on me." Yeah, I know, Rachel muttered. Humans are dramatic. We can't help it. Comes standard with the species. The sound hit her before she processed what it was. Low, mechanical, growing louder. Engines. Ship engines. The distinctive whine of atmospheric thrusters fighting gravity and winning. A rescue shuttle broke through the cloud cover, searchlights cutting through the gathering dusk. It circled once, twice, then began its descent toward the clearing. Rachel wanted to feel relieved. Should have felt relieved. But all she could think about was Flint, still sitting beside her, watching the approaching ship with wary attention. Listen, Rachel said urgently, grabbing Flint's attention. When they land, they're going to see you as a threat. That's what humans do. We see teeth and claws and we react. But you stay close to me, understand? Don't run. Don't attack. Just stay close. Flint's patterns pulsed in what she hoped was understanding. The shuttle touched down with practiced precision, kicking up debris and smoke. The boarding ramp lowered before the engines fully powered down. 4 figures emerged in full environmental suits, weapons drawn, moving with the careful efficiency of people who'd done extractions in hostile territory before. They spotted the wreckage first. Then Rachel. Then Flint. Every weapon snapped to target the cub. "Stand down!" Rachel's voice came out stronger than she felt. "Lower your weapons. Now!" The lead figure, hard to tell gender through the suit, but the voice that came through the external speaker sounded female and annoyed, spoke up. "Ma'am, we're here to extract you. That creature is with me," Rachel interrupted. "And if anyone shoots it, we're going to have problems." "Ma'am, you're clearly injured. That's a predator. You may be experiencing—" "I'm experiencing a lot of things right now," Rachel said, fighting to keep her voice level. "Pain, exhaustion, irritation at being argued with when I'm bleeding in an alien jungle. But I'm not experiencing confusion or delusion. This is Flint. Flint is coming with me. Non-negotiable." The rescue team exchanged glances. Weapons stayed trained on Flint, who'd moved closer to Rachel, body language screaming defensive, but not aggressive. The cub's patterns had dimmed to near invisibility, camouflage instinct kicking in despite being completely exposed. "I can't authorize," the lead started. Rachel made a decision that was either brilliant or would get her left behind in an alien jungle. She shifted her position, moving to physically cover Flint with her own body. Every injury screamed protest. Her vision swam. But she held the position, meeting the lead's faceplate with as much determination as she could muster. "Then, I'm not leaving," Rachel said flatly. "You can stand there and argue, Or you can accept that I'm taking Flint with me. Your call. But I'm not moving without the cub. Silence. The kind that stretched and became uncomfortable. Rachel could practically hear the mental calculations happening behind those faceplates. Mission parameters versus stubborn cargo pilot. Extraction protocols versus someone actively refusing rescue. Finally, the lead spoke. You're taking full responsibility for that creature. Absolutely. Any injuries it causes, any damage, any incidents, on me. I get it. Now can we please get moving before I bleed out here? That would be embarrassing for everyone. More silence. Then the lead gestured to the medical specialist. Fine, but it stays sedated during transport. No sedation, Rachel said immediately. You try to drug Flint, and I'll make this extremely difficult for everyone. The cub stays conscious and stays with me. Ma'am? Look, Rachel said, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I just survived a ship crash, field surgery, and a pack of adult predators who wanted to kill both of us. I defended this cub with a piece of sharp metal and sheer stubbornness. We've been through things together that you couldn't understand if I spent hours explaining. So when I say Flint comes with me, conscious and unharmed, I mean it. Find a way to make it work, or leave us both here. She was bluffing. Mostly. She'd absolutely take the rescue if they insisted on leaving Flint behind. Survival trumped sentiment. But she'd also spent enough time with humans to know that sometimes, if you committed to the bit hard enough, people would cave rather than deal with the hassle. The medical specialist approached carefully, scanning Rachel with handheld instruments. Multiple lacerations, significant blood loss, possible internal bleeding, definitely infected wounds. She needs medical attention immediately. Then let's get her on the shuttle, the lead said. The creature— Flint, Rachel corrected. Flint, the word came out reluctant, can come. But it stays in the cargo section, separated by containment field. Rachel looked at Flint, who looked back with those intelligent eyes. Is that acceptable? She asked the cub, knowing full well that Flint couldn't answer in any way the rescue team would recognize. Flint's patterns pulsed once, soft blue-green. Good enough for me, Rachel said. Getting to the shuttle was an adventure in pain management and stubbornness. 2 team members supported Rachel while she limped across the clearing, each step sending fresh waves of agony through her ribs. Flint followed, limping on that bad leg, maintaining distance from the armed humans, but never losing sight of Rachel. The cargo section wasn't large, but it was separated from the main cabin by a shimmering containment field. Standard safety protocol for transporting potentially dangerous life forms. Flint entered without hesitation, settling into the space with surprising grace. Those eyes never left Rachel as she was helped into the main cabin and strapped into a medical gurney. Vitals are stabilizing, the medical specialist reported, attaching monitors and starting an IV. But she needs proper surgical attention. Those field stitches won't hold much longer. The shuttle lifted off, engines thrumming. Rachel's head swam as medication hit her system. Pain management, antibiotics, probably something to keep her from going into shock. Through the containment field, she could see Flint, watching her with that same intense focus. So, the lead said, settling into the seat beside Rachel's gurney. Want to tell me what actually happened down there? Crashed, Rachel said, words starting to slur as the medication kicked in. Got injured. Met Flint. Bonded over mutual trauma. Fought off a predator pack with attitude and improvisation. Survived. The usual. The usual. You'd be surprised how often I end up in these situations, Rachel mumbled. I have a gift for finding trouble. or trouble has a gift for finding me. Haven't decided which. The creature, Flint, it really stayed with you? Protected you? Rachel's eyes drifted closed. Not a creature. Friend. Big difference. We're both survivors. Same scars, different species. Same stubborn refusal to quit. That's insane. Yeah, Rachel agreed, consciousness fading. Probably. But insane is kind of humanity's whole thing, isn't it? We make friends with predators. We refuse to abandon things we care about. We survive situations that should kill us through sheer bloody-minded determination. It's what we do. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was the medical specialist's voice. Vitals are good. She'll make it. Of course she'd make it. Making it was what survivors did. 3 weeks later, Rachel stood in a habitat observation room watching Flint pace the enclosure with increasing confidence. The limp was less pronounced now. Proper medical care had done wonders. Xenobiologists hovered nearby, taking notes, arguing in quiet voices about behavior patterns and social structures, and a dozen other things that Rachel tuned out. Her own wounds had healed well. The stitches were gone, replaced by fresh scars that would eventually fade into the gallery she already carried. Her ribs still ached sometimes, and her shoulder would probably never be quite the same. But she was mobile, and functional, and alive. More than that, she was there. Every day she visited. Every day Flint would stop whatever it was doing and come to the transparent barrier, patterns pulsing in recognition. Sometimes Rachel would talk, sharing stories about space and ships and the various disasters she'd survived. Sometimes she'd just sit there, and they'd exist in comfortable silence. The xenobiologists couldn't explain the bond. They tried. Oh, they tried, citing stress responses and survival instincts and temporary pack behavior. But their theories all fell apart when faced with the simple reality. Human and Najra, maintaining connection across species barriers that shouldn't have been crossable. On the 32nd day, Rachel rolled up her sleeves during a visit. The scars were visible through the barrier, old ones and new ones, history written in tissue and time. Flint moved closer, pressing against the transparent surface, showing its own healing wounds. 2 survivors, marked by their refusal to quit, finding something rare and valuable in each other. Understanding, companionship, proof that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant holding on to the things worth living. For, even when logic said to let go. Rachel pressed her hand against the barrier. Flint's paw met it from the other side. Yeah, Rachel said softly. We made it. Both of us. Against terrible odds and worse luck. Because that's what we do. The xenobiologists kept taking notes. Rachel ignored them. Outside the facility, ships came and went. The galaxy spun on. Somewhere another human was probably about to do something stubbornly heroic and completely inadvisable. Somewhere another survivor was refusing to quit against impossible odds. And here, in a habitat on a medical station orbiting a planet Rachel couldn't pronounce, a woman and an alien predator cub maintained their silent vigil. Proof that the universe could throw everything it had at you, and sometimes, just sometimes, you'd find something worth keeping in the wreckage. The scars proved they'd survived. The bond proved they'd chosen to survive together. And in the end, that made all the difference.